Welcome everyone to Arbinger's fourth and final session in our limited series, Forging Resilience in Chaos. Over the last 2 weeks, we've had some really spectacular presentations. Welcome everyone. And we've learned really the value of resilience. And I appreciate everybody for being here with us. From Desmond Lomax's presentation last Wednesday, I believe it was, we learned that to take care of others, you must first take care of yourself. He provided excellent guidance on ways we could start doing that immediately. I highly recommend going back and watching his and all of these presentations. Next, we learned from Mitch Warner. He discussed building an organizational change plan. And one thing he said that I really loved was, no one wants to buy into vision, but there are people in your organization who may have a vision that just need to be brought to the table. Finally, yesterday, we heard from Chip Huth on his presentation and how to grow in chaos. And one thing that I really loved that Chip said was that as humans, we are built for adaptability. That's kind of stuck in my head since he gave that presentation, and I really appreciated that and all of the sessions. So as a reminder, today's session is being recorded, and you will later receive a link to not only this session, but to all of those previous sessions, whether you watch them or not. So you'll have the option of going back and learning those same great lessons that I did, and that I hope some of you who've already watched these presentations did. I highly encourage you to share those as well, because I do think they're really valuable and especially relevant right now. A few notes to begin with. As I mentioned, these are being recorded, as were the sessions from our previous set of webinars, managing rapid change in crisis, Those now live on arbinger.com/webinars. That's our webinar page. This session will also live there, as well as all of the ones from this particular presentation, this block of presentations. In addition to that, we host there our Q&A sessions that I've gotten to conduct with these different speakers that we've had, both this session and the previous session. So there's a lot of great content that lives there that's in addition to these webinars. And I highly recommend going to arbinger.com/webinars, where you can request access to that content and those conversations. In those conversations, I was able to take some of your questions, because we do get a lot of questions, especially as you submit and sign up, as well as in the Q&A section here on the webinar and in the chat, thousands and thousands of questions. So we've done our best to pull out some really salient and valuable questions and taken a minute to dive in more deeply in those Q&A sessions. So again, I highly recommend going and downloading those and then sharing them. We are broadcasting this concurrently on our YouTube channel. If you have any sort of issue with the Zoom platform, you can always jump over to YouTube. Sometimes that's a little easier for people if Zoom is having issues. As you are watching live today or rewatching in the future, I would love, and we would love, if you would let us know what you're learning, what you are appreciating. Please share this on your social media. If you have any great takeaways, if there's a good quote you love, a great screen cap. I know Mitch especially is very good at giving lists of action items of 2 or 3 points. And I've seen that pop up a number of times on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. If you would like to share any of those things with your network, please do so with the hashtag Outward Mindset. That way we can continue to learn from each other, and at Arbinger, we can continue to learn from you and do our best to continue meeting your needs in our upcoming series, as well as in our other content that we're creating. We encourage you to interact on the chat here, which sometimes gets flying by pretty quickly, but please interact, introduce yourself, let everybody know where you're from. Please chat, share with each other. Those same insights that you might share on your social media are just as valuable in this chat. There's something very comforting about recognizing from one another that you're not the only one who's really identifying with something. I love that part of these webinars and that bit of community that we can help build that way. So please go ahead and chat with each other as much as you like. We have some Arbinger people in there as well, who most of them are watching the session and trying to get as much out of it. And they can also answer questions as they pop up. I do recognize though that if that chat gets moving quickly, we do miss some of your questions. If they go by and nobody notices them, It's nothing personal. It's just moving pretty quickly. So if you have any questions that you need answers, please go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A section on this. I think it's on the bottom of your screen. You can click Q&A. There are moderators watching that. So they'll definitely be looked at when they otherwise might get lost in the chat. So please, we welcome you to use that feature. So next, I have the pleasure today of introducing Dr. Laura Lambert. I get to sit down with Laura and ask her some questions. I've gathered a lot of the questions that you have submitted in your registration for this, as well as other questions we've gotten via our email, info@arbinger.com, and done my best to pull out some that I think, pull out a few that I think we're gonna get a lot of value from, even though there are so many. So I've done my best to kind of cull this list and identify some really great questions. Dr. Laura Lambert is a professor of surgery and the director of peritoneal malignancy program at the University of Utah. Dr. Lambert specializes in the care of patients requiring surgical treatment related to peritoneal carcinomatosis and gastrointestinal oncology. I knew I was going to mess up at least one of those words. She has a lot of syllables. She swims in a lot of amazing syllables and does a lot of amazing work. I don't know all about it or what exactly it means. So I'll give Laura just a second to correct me on all the things I'm saying incorrectly. Laura last year gave a stellar presentation at Arbinger's 2019 summit that was very well received. And that video can also be made available upon request. Laura is also, I would just like to say, she's very deeply committed to living with an outward mindset. And we're very fortunate to have her here with us today. So Laura, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us from your office at the University of Utah.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really great to be here, and thank you to Arbinger for providing these wonderful series during this time of such great need that we have.
It's so good to see you. So quickly, before we begin, you heard me absolutely destroy your practice and your specialties. So can you tell the viewers what it is that you do, and say so in the correct pronunciation?
Actually, you did really well. So as you mentioned, I'm a cancer surgeon here at the University of Utah. My practice focuses on the surgical management of people who have advanced cancers that have spread through the abdominal cavity. And that's what the words peritoneal carcinomatosis refer to, as just cancer that has spread through the abdomen, the belly cavity.
Thank you so much for all that you do and for being with us. Having your expertise, especially right now, is so valuable, and I'm so thankful for it. So Laura, while we were preparing for this conversation, I asked you a question that has come up a lot of times just by virtue of the name of this series. And that question that I would like to present to you to begin is, what is resilience?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Sarah. And as we talked about, I think there's a real difference between resilience and wellness, and they often get lumped together. But it's really in times of crisis like the one that we're facing with this global pandemic, where wellness is somewhat hard to find, and yet we see so many people who have such great resilience and are able to continue to cope with the circumstances that are literally quite out of everybody's control right now. And I think that's sort of what it comes down to, right? Is how do we cope in a situation where we've lost control? As the existential philosophers will tell you, we are meaning-seeking beings in what can sometimes seem like a meaningless universe, and it is very hard when things that we thought we could rely on are changed dramatically, and we've lost all control. So everybody is used to getting up and going to work and having a certain routine, and now all of that has changed, and none of us have any control out of it. And so I think when we're talking about resilience, it's really, where do I find strength to keep going in situations where I've lost control? And quite frankly, it's forcing all of us to consider some of the big questions in life. What does this mean? What is life all about? What's really important to me? And we're kind of all being forced to consider those questions at this time.
I love that, Laura. How you break that up into these three kind of simple and direct pieces that altogether kind of define resilience. How do I find meaning to cope with a crisis? How do I keep going in the midst of a crisis? And how do we come together during times of stress? And for those of you who think I maybe made that up or took those notes on my own, I did not. I stole those straight from Laura. If you don't mind, I'd like to start by diving a little more deeply into each of those topics, starting with how do I find meaning and cope with a crisis? And one of the most common questions that we've gotten, not just here, but really everywhere on the news and in our daily conversations on social media, which is, how can I cope with my own fears?
Yeah. So if I can share a really personal example of that, as a physician, but as a cancer surgeon, I'm not really on the front lines right now with the COVID pandemic. And fortunately, in Utah, we've really been lucky that we haven't seen a surge like they're seeing in other parts of the country, in New York and Massachusetts in the Northeast. But my father is actually still a practicing anesthesiologist at one of the major hospitals in Boston. And they are indeed being overrun with people who are suffering with COVID. And, he is in his late 70s, and, most people at that time are retired and enjoying the rest of their life and doing other things. And we as a family have had to really come to grips with the fact that he is really on the front lines. He is one of the people who's responsible for intubating people who are having trouble breathing. So that puts them at a high risk, him at a high risk of being exposed to COVID-19. Obviously, these are also the sickest people in the hospital that he's interacting with on a regular basis. And we've chatted as a family about what that means. And he's also in a high risk category, being older, that if he should contract the virus, there's a real chance that he could die from it. And so not only is he, he's putting as much as a privilege as it is to care for people as a physician, we're not often asked to put our own lives on the line. And yet in this circumstance, many people across the country, including my father, are being asked to do that. And, I just want to express my gratitude to all those physicians, nurses, first responders, everybody who is really putting their life on the line to help save other people's lives. And how do you go forward with that? He and I and my mother have been having serious conversations about what does it mean to be a physician? What does it mean to be a healthcare provider in this setting? And one of the things that he taught me, and one of the reasons why I went into medicine, was because there is no greater privilege than to be able to care for another person and to provide for them in that way. And basically, that is what is getting him through the fear of contracting the virus himself, is that he and I and anybody who's involved in healthcare has been privileged to take care of other people. And now it's our opportunity to, as much as we possibly can, repay that privilege. And I think I know what's helping him is thinking about the people that he's helping, right? That outward mindset of thinking about the people that he's helping and not focusing as much on his own needs or having his own objectives, his own needs, his own fears. And I think when we can do that, when we can look to others and see how we can help others in their time of need, even though we may be in a time of need, I think that for me, and I know for my father, that has been a way that we've gotten through challenging times like this.
Wow, Laura, thank you so much for sharing. And a question that we got that I think maybe is a good follow-up to that is, while that is all such amazing advice and a great way to live outward, what if I'm feeling weak? How can I identify my own weakness as I try to find meaning in this?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And again, I think that's a lot where, situations like this bring that up, and it can expose our own weaknesses. And again, remember, thinking with an outward mindset, if you get back to the, the Arbinger paradigm of that, it's not only seeing others as people, but seeing ourselves as people as well. And recognizing that we all do have weaknesses, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. And I think the more honest that we can be with ourselves about those and recognize what we can and can't do to help others while we're also recognizing what we need for ourselves. There's nothing wrong about recognizing your own needs. They are just as important as others. And that, if you remember well, you remember, but if everybody remembers the Arbinger paradigm, that when we see others as people, and we're seeing them the same as we're seeing ourselves. We're equal. We're not better than or less than or worse than. And the same way, other people are not more important or less important than we are, stronger or weaker. We're all in this together. And I think if one thing that can come out of recognizing our own weaknesses is that we can recognize that other people have weaknesses too. And we can recognize the humanity in those people and their weaknesses and their needs, and not necessarily hold them to a higher expectation than we are holding ourselves to. So I think in a way, our weaknesses can become, being able to recognize our own weaknesses can become a strength and a way for us to help others when we're recognizing weakness in them.
As a leader, I think we have a level of responsibility to our teams who are going through this stress and anxiety as well. Do you have any advice for how a leader may help foster that resilience in their team?
Yeah, so I happen to be in a leadership position myself. So I'm taking over as the residency program director here at the University of Utah in general surgery. So those are doctors who are doctors but are in training to become surgeons. And I think, one of the most important things that I'm recognizing as a leader is establishing trust. And so I think, and one of those ways that you can establish trust is by just being human with the people that you're leading. Yes, you have to be responsible and accountable for your duties as a leader, and I think you do have to show strength in your leadership, but I think it's also helpful to show your own human side and to recognize and acknowledge that, hey, there are times when this feels overwhelming to me as well. And these are the things that I do. I take time to get outside. I take time to spend with my family just to kind of regroup and then kind of jump back into the fray and give them permission to do the same thing. But also being transparent about what's happening. I think one of the hardest things when there's so many unknowns and so many unknowns about the impact that this virus and the situation that we're in is going to have on economics going forward, job security, all that sort of stuff. As a leader, I think we need to be very transparent about what we do and don't know, and that we're going to be there, just helping them to feel that they're going to have support no matter what. So no matter what, we're going to work through this together, and I'm here to help you as best I can.
Thank you, Laura. I'd like to move on to the second part of your definition of resilience, which is, how do I keep going in the midst of crisis? This is obviously very relevant immediately, but I think it's also relevant all the time as we go through our lives. One of the questions we got, which I thought was really interesting, is what are the obstacles that get in our way as we try to become resilient?
Again, I think, so to get back to the first question, how do I keep going if I can? I'm going to quote from the German philosopher Nietzsche, who said that he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. And the other Jewish German therapist and psychotherapist and philosopher, Viktor Frankl, picked up on that as well in his work, Man's Search for Meaning, where he looked at people who were living in Nazi concentration camps, and he really noticed the difference between people who, despite unbelievably challenging circumstances, if they were able to find some meaning in their circumstances, they were able to find a way to survive through just, horrible situations that most of us, I'm sure, can't imagine. And I think that applies now, and I think it applies even, and not in times of crisis, major crisis, but we all experience trials in our lives. And, I think that's the key is for each of us individually, if we can find the why or the meaning or find some meaning out of the situation, then that provides us with opportunities that we might not have otherwise considered, options that we might not otherwise have considered, find strength in places that we might not have found it before. And it kind of comes back again to having that outward mindset, like Arbinger talks about so much, is that once we can have that outward mindset and we start seeing others as people, we're out of that box and we're not as stuck as we were before. And we can really start to see other ways of helping and working through situations that don't occur to us when we're more inwardly focused. The obstacles. I think it really comes down to mindset, and it's not an easy, quick fix, as anybody who's really thought about and worked through the Arbinger principles knows. This is it's a process, and it's about progress, and it's not about perfection, and it's about recognizing. It's a lot of deep intrapersonal work, that takes time. And the first thing I think is starting to recognize those obstacles. And once we do, and we're recognize those obstacles, and yet, again, using Arbinger parlance, start to recognize perhaps our own role in what those obstacles are, we can start to see ways either around them or through them, or maybe they're not obstacles that really exist, but ones that we've sort of created, or had a role in creating. So I think that's the first part, is awareness. Just like the Arbinger workshops teach us about self-awareness and recognizing our role in the situation and trying to get into an outward mindset, whether it's with another person, the actual situation. And this will, again, I said, provide more opportunities than what we thought we had before, when we feel stuck, when we're in that inward mindset.
Well, Laura, you essentially answered my next 4 questions already, which is perfect, because I wanted to move on to the third section without missing too much of the conversation. So let's move on to the third piece of that resilience puzzle. How do we come together in times of stress? And I think this is very crucial right now, and a concept that you are uniquely qualified to speak on. I think surgeons in general, and especially in the field of cancer, a level of stress that you deal with in your daily life on the job is far greater than what I deal with. But right now I'm put in this position that's so uncomfortable and unfamiliar for me. And sometimes I think we've all kind of seen how chaos can bring out both the best and the worst in people. So how can resilience help us come together? Where can we find unity?
Yeah. So that's a really great question. And I think it really comes back to our mindset, right? Where there's no way that we're going to come together unless we have an outward mindset. And it doesn't take much to think about how much better and more effective we're going to be if we're all working together with an outward mindset than if we're each kind of in our own little silos. And certainly we're seeing that now. We've experienced it here at the University of Utah. Each individual section so like, for example, in our Department of Surgery, then we have divisions of different specialties. And then within those divisions, we even have sections, and each section is coming up with its own way of dividing up manpower in case there's a surge, and how are we as surgeons going to function, where are we going to be needed, how are we going to cover our own patients. And then at the division level, which is the next level up, there's a plan that's being put in place. And then at the department level, there's another plan, and we're constantly getting surveys about would you be able to help in this capacity, would you be able to help in that capacity. And then at the institutional level, And so it gets complicated. And so it's sort of like, an outwardly nice inward mindset in a way. Everybody's trying to do their part and their right thing, but we're not all working together and coming together. And so, that's sort of an organizational thing where you do need sort of one big umbrella. But as long as each section individual is thinking, what can I do to help the institution, and recognizing not just my own needs and objectives, but what are the overall arching needs of the institution to provide the care that we need to provide for the people in Utah. I think that's, what's going to bring us together. I can give you a very personal example of how the outwardly nice inward mindset can really backfire. So back in 2010, when Haiti had that horrific earthquake, my father and I, and my mother, who was a retired operating room nurse, we have been going to Haiti since 1990 to provide surgical care to the people of Haiti. And when that earthquake struck in 2010, we felt this absolute need to go down and help and to do whatever we can. And there was a huge rush and a huge outpouring of providers who wanted to get down there and help and be on the ground. And we jumped on one of the first planes that went down there, and we got out at the airport, and there was nothing set. Like, there was nothing. There was no place for us to stay. There wasn't anything for us to eat. There was no place for us to operate. And so again, sort of this outwardly nice, but kind of inward mindset where we weren't really thinking about what are the actual needs of the people on the ground. We hadn't done our homework. We hadn't really stopped to think about the outward triangles of the Haitian government, the people in Haiti. While we wanted to be there, we wanted to help, and we did do some help. We did provide some help, but it wasn't what we envisioned it was going to be. And quite frankly, we were probably more in the way than if we hadn't gone and had done something closer to home. And just recently, one of our wonderful residents here at the University of Utah asked if there was any way that he could go and volunteer in a place where they have greater need than we do right now. Again, sort of a very outwardly nice, but kind of an inward mindset in that sense. We all have this drive that we want to jump in and help, but really the best way that we can help, and this is true for everybody, is wherever you are, play your role in this pandemic. Stay home, stay safe, social distancing, be available to help when the call comes in your neighborhood. Traveling right now to an area where there's a high incidence and then trying to come back is noble, but it's not the right thing to do. And so I think that's where, the more people who can be thinking with an outward mindset, not so much exactly, thinking, specifically like, this is what I want to do and this is how I can help, but how can I help others is really the way that we're going to come together through a pandemic like this, and as well as, after this in our institutions, in our organizations, in our businesses, and really try to turn the world outward. I think that's, the goal of the Arbinger Institute. And I think the more we can do that, the more we're going to, just be well and be more resilient through this crisis and the next one to come.
Laura, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and your willingness to share both practical advice and knowledge as well as these deeply personal examples. It's not every day that I get to have such a fulfilling conversation with someone as impressive and intelligent and informed as you, and it really means a lot to me personally and to the organization, and I hope to the viewers too as well. And I hope that all of you watching were able to get something out of this presentation, which I can't imagine you didn't. Laura, thank you so much. Dr. Laura Lambert from her office at the University of Utah. Thank you, Laura, for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. May I make one more comment?
Sure.
I just want to say, the title of the webinar was "We're All Doctors." I just want to say what we really all are is healers. We don't need to be doctors. We just need to see others as people to help them heal. And Arbinger is doing that. Thank you so much for letting me be here, Sarah. It was great.
We are all healers. I love that. I'm going to write that down. I hope you all write that down and share it with everybody. That's so beautiful. By way of reminder, this session has been recorded and you will receive a link to this presentation as well as to all the presentations in this series in your email. And we invite you to share that with anybody that you think might get some value out of these presentations, out of this important series. And after this is done, all of this will be put together, compiled by our video team and hosted on arbinger.com/webinars. You'll be able to find this, the additional sessions from this series, as well as those we recorded the previous 2 weeks in our Managing Rapid Change in Crisis series, and also those Q&A presentations that I was able to have with many of our speakers. We look forward to launching our next webinar, which will start on April 22nd. And that one will be Thriving in the New Normal, starting April 22nd, Thriving in the New Normal. You can look forward to receiving more details about that, including specific dates, times, speakers, and session titles. And if you have any specific topics you would love to see covered, please go ahead, email us, contact us, info@arbinger.com, send us an email, reach out to us on social media. We love to hear your feedback and appreciate that a lot. If you have not yet followed Arbinger on LinkedIn, please do. Right after this, go to LinkedIn, follow Arbinger. You'll also get it's the quickest way to get details about that future webinar and other announcements we have coming up. We do, again, have really exciting things right on the horizon that I wish I could tell you right now, but I am strictly not allowed to tell you, but they are on their way and we'll be talking all about it on social media. So please look for that, connect with us, and be the first to find out. Finally, for those who have not yet registered, Arbinger has a special workshop planned on April 14th. It's called Leading Change in Crisis. This is a virtually facilitated session with Arbinger Master Facilitator Mike Merchant. Mike brings his deep experience in strategic planning to this session and will be diving deeply into the challenges faced by the participants of this workshop. So it's a very practical conversation. You won't want to miss it. You can see the information here on this slide. You can send us an email if you're interested in learning more about it, but the fastest way to be contacted is to go ahead and put your name in the Q&A section on this webinar right now. So first name, last name, email address, and we will make sure your name gets to the right people. That seating for that workshop is limited. So please go ahead, put your name in the Q&A if you're interested in that Leading in Crisis workshop on April 14th. Thank you all for joining us and for joining me in this series, Forging Resilience in Chaos. Personally, I learned a lot. I'm really grateful that I get to be the one who participates in all of these sessions and have these amazing conversations and help our different presenters prepare and to share your questions with them and provide as much value and help as we can in this very complicated and stressful time. And I hope that everybody feels just a little bit better knowing that there are people like Laura who are out there looking out for us and helping us all get through this together. So thank you so much for being here. Until our next series beginning April 22nd, thank you and stay safe.